Alexander of Macedon by Harold Lamb. The Riddle of the Earth's Shape. Let's see if we can conclude this. His easy good nature delighted Alexander, who kept Hephaestion close to him, having found at last a friend. But Dilemma said spitefully of the pair that Hephaestion was the man of the two. As Antipater looked after the policing of Macedon, said Olympias, immediately assumed the direction of the palace. Alexander was free to spend most of his time in the olive groves of Misa's gardens, where the Stagirite worked at his problems. Still the philosopher would lay down no axioms to his pupil. Greek philosophy, he thought, had stagnated, because it had become too abstract in its search after values. Socrates had turned it aside from its quest after pure reason by his rough questioning, until Socrates, too many Greeks had limited their efforts to the past, to the how of creation and the nature of the divine powers. Almost for the first time the stubborn Athenian questioner had refused to wonder how human life had come to be, and had asked instead what it might make of itself. His objective had been to find the purpose for which the world existed, not the source from which it came, and in his lone quest of the objective he had been forced to commit suicide. Well, people don't force you to commit suicide, but Aristotle, with his hard peasant's head and his work-stained fingers, was following out this quest. In his reasoning, the mystery of the world's soul might be impenetrable, but human evolution could be measured and directed like that of animals, of which he was compiling his history. Men, whole peoples, had developed from something and were changing continually into something else. That process of changing could be measured and directed. It seemed as if this process were for the sake of the thing evolved, for the end result, not for the automatic process itself. And if this were true, men might be freed forever from the fear of a predetermined fate. Men might be free to shape their own evolution if they could understand the process. So the Stagirite discussed with his pupils the first of the mysteries that he had kept secret until then in his mind, and Alexander, understanding little as yet, was fired by the purpose that lay behind the endless experimentation. It was Olympias who insisted that he should lead an expedition against the tribes beyond the frontier, who had become troublesome in the absence of the field army. The people liked to see you as a leader, not to hear that you were reading books. Antipater made the preparations, and Alexander went without enthusiasm. But his mother made the departure a parade, closing the shops for that day and riding at his side in her light chariot. Having sent Antipater ahead with his foot soldiers, bareheaded, on the great horse Bucephalus, Alexander drew enthusiastic shouts from the watchers. When they were alone beyond the streets, Olympias drew him close beside her, whispering as she kissed him that she knew he was not as other men. It had been her secret, she confided, but now he had the right to share it. She always had been devoted to the shrine of Samothrace, where the so-called gods appeared to mortals, and on the night before her marriage she dreamed that the night wind of the inland rushed by her room. The light of the stars had been dimmed, and sudden thunder had shaken the house, until light flashed down upon her and spread kindling flames along the room. Until she waked. Upon that night she had been impregnated, and not in Philip's bed. Well, Shayatin min al jinn, but joining in what her and Philip shared. Certainly it is. Aristander, the diviner, tells me that you are a child of the gods. So Olympias left him, crying to him to bear himself as became his birth, sighting Hephaestion behind them. She paused fleetingly at the companion's side, whispering, "That boy, protect him, but tell him he must stop slandering me to Zeus's wife." And off she went, waving back, fair to behold, as Nausicaa in her chariot. And so Alexander rode on his first expedition, silent and afraid. He dreaded ridicule, and he felt coldness settle on him like a garment when they began to climb the hills, but he found that he had to do nothing more than ride in the center of his small force, for Hephaestion, who looked on as this looked upon this as no greater matter than a chase after a deer, was ready with a word or a jest to help him out of any hesitation, and the veteran Macedonian commander gave all orders. The Highlanders of the Mate tribe withdrew to the heights, only annoying the Macedonians with arrows, while they tried to save their herds. On Antipater's advice, Alexander did not destroy the deserted town of Mate, but brought in settlers from the nearest farmlands and built defense towers for them. Hephaestion suggested naming the place Alexandria, Alexander's city, as Philip had recently christened a captured city, Philippi. It was a quiet spot in the mountains, where the wood smoke drifted through the trees. Alexander reflected that by the Stagirites' reasoning, he and his Macedonians had been like those cattle-breeding Mate only a few centuries before.